Okay, so in this week's guitar lesson, we're going to talk about how you take a familiar melody, a melody from a song, and you improvise around that melody. So you use the melody as your anchor, and then you play embellishments and you do your own thing to that melody and you kind of work it into your solo. And this happens all the time in just about every style of music. And I used to wonder how artists did that. It seemed almost magical that you could do that on the fly. You could take a melody and kind of work that in and then also sort of improvise around that melody. So we're going to take the song Ain't She Sweet, which is a classic old song in the public domain. I thought this would be perfect. There's sort of two parts to the melody. And we're going to use that as our melody to create the solo. And this is what it's going to sound like. So in this video, we're going to go through the first half of that lead and break it all down. If you'd like to join us for the second half, download the tab for the entire solo and also get the MP3 jam track so that you can practice playing everything we're going to talk through. You can get those extra materials by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP605. Okay, so the point of this lesson is not to learn the song Ain't She Sweet, although you will be learning how to play it. That's not the point. So if you're bummed out and you're like, I don't like that song. Well, the point is to take a melody. You can apply this to anything once you understand the principles that we're going to talk through. That's the better way to say it. And so if I were to take Happy Birthday, let's see, and play it in the same key that this song is in, which is the key of G. The melody is like that, right? I could take that and I could throw in some extra notes. Little embellishments and things where you can still hear the melody, but I'm throwing in some chromatic notes, I'm doing little bends and little subtle things to make that sort of unique. It's now I'm singing it my way. It's even though there is this, the by the books melody, I'm putting my own sort of signature to it. And that's what's cool about this is you'll have your own sound that you'll be able to apply to whatever it is you're playing. So we're going to be looking at Ain't She Sweet in the key of G, and the chords go like this. It's like a G diminished 7 down to a D7. I'll talk more about the chords in just a minute, but that's what's going on. But all I think about when I'm playing this, the melody for this, I'm thinking about one thing really, and that's the G major scale, because that's the key of the song. The G major scale is right here, and so I connect everything to chord shapes. This is just how my brain works, and this is how it makes the whole thing much easier, at least in my opinion. So the song that we're going to be playing is in the key of G. I'm thinking about my G chord right here, where I bar on the 3rd fret, and that's using the E shape from the Cage system. So off of that E shape, I've got my G major scale in 2 octaves, like this. There's 1 octave. There's the 2nd octave. And both of those octaves of the G major scale, in my mind, they're connected to this chord shape. This is how you use the Cage system to play solos. It's not just for chords, it's a way to organize your scales as well. It's really just an organization system for the fretboard. And so I'm going to put a lesson up on the screen where I actually take the G major scale and I show you how to play it in all 5 positions. So this will be one of those 5 positions. And so you definitely want to check that out if you're not familiar with playing the major scale all over the fretboard. Although, don't let that slow you down from being able to just jump into this lesson. Here's all you need to know for this lesson. You need to know this little bit of it. And you start with your pinky, make sure your fingers line up correctly. Your index fingers over the 2nd fret, middle fingers over the 3rd, ring fingers over the 4th, and your pinkies over the 5th fret. And you start on that 5th fret, 4th string. You walk it up like this. Up to that last note, which would be 3rd fret, 1st string. Okay, so now that we have our bearings, we have our G major scale in this position. When I started playing this, I started on this note, which is the 6th interval of my G major scale. Check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what I did is I walked it down from here, from the 6th down to the 5th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we walked chromatically. So we walk like this. So that's the first of, there's really 2 principles that go into this whole idea of improvising around a melody, and this is the first, is chromatic notes. This is huge and a big part of it. So you can take your major scale and you can fill in those notes in between, and there's 2 spots in your major scale where it sounds the best, in my opinion. The first is between your 2nd and 3rd interval. So if we're counting our scale out, 1, 2, 3, so it's 1, 2, there it is, so right between the 2 and the 3. So that's in your G run, for example. Right? So that's the first one. And the second one is between the 5th and the 6th interval. So those 2 are really prominent in music. And you hear that a lot because there's a lot of movement that happens in the major scale. So that kind of stuff happens by playing those chromatic notes. So that's the first kind of idea. So when we're playing Ain't She Sweet, that's what's happening. It's just, you know, really 2 notes from their major scale, the 6th and the 5th interval, with that chromatic note in between. All right, so taking the principle of what I just explained by using those chromatic notes, let's apply that to Happy Birthday, for example. So if we're playing Happy Birthday in the key of G, it goes between the 5th and 6th, right? Of your major scale. So now I can work in those chromatic notes. So you can do it however you want, but that's just the first little simple idea of embellishing a melody, is working in chromatic notes. Now you can do them all over the fretboard, but those are 2 prominent areas between the 2nd and 3rd interval of your major scale, if you've got a melody that uses those 2 notes, or between the 5th and the 6th. All right, so applying this to Ain't She Sweet, we've just got a simple walk down then. And all I'm doing there is 5, 4, and 3. Frets 5, 4, and 3 on the 2nd string. And then once I got to that 3rd fret, 2nd string, I threw in the D7 chord. That's your 5 chord. That's where in the chord structure, the song would be playing over the 5 chord. So it kind of goes to 1 chord to the 5 chord with a diminished 7 chord in between. So it's, right? And then the second time, just to make it kind of fun, change the timing up a little bit. Actually, it's not changing the timing, it's just more staccato sounding. And then I went, that's 3, 5, 3, frets 3, 5, and 3 on the 2nd string. And just making it kind of fun. You can do fun little things like that where you bounce around the notes of the major scale. And we'll get to that in just a second, but that's where I'm going for the second idea that's applied here. The first is chromatic. The second is taking notes from your major scale and working those into your lead around the melody. That's really all there is to this whole principle here, is those 2 ideas. So now we're just going to keep playing the melody. That's just playing it straight. There was really no embellishment to that. Now I worked this out by ear, so don't think I just sat down and did it, you know, first time. I had to sit down and I knew the melody, but I had to kind of work it out. But it's played using the notes from my G major scale. So it starts here, and I started with my middle finger on the 3rd fret, 2nd string. We go up to the 5th fret, and then we're gonna do a little slide there. But these notes come from the G major scale. The right out of the melody of the song. So just playing it straight there. Now, the way the song would go if I kept playing it straight. Now remember, we've played it straight so far. That's just right out of the melody. If I kept playing it straight, I'd go. But that's so boring. And what I ended up playing was. So now that's the big thing. Like, how did you take this and turn it into... Well, let's look at what's going on here. When I play this, here's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, first of all, my G chord using the E shape. I've got my G major pentatonic scale. Remember, inside of your G major scale are the 5 notes of your major pentatonic scale. The major scale is the same thing, it's just got 2 extra notes. So a quick version sometimes is just to jump into that major pentatonic because we're all so comfortable and familiar with that. That's my major pentatonic scale pattern 2. I talked about this actually last week. I'll put that lesson up on the screen where we had the minor pentatonic and then the major pentatonic, right? And you blend the two. This is that sweet spot that I'm talking about. So it's a little part of the G major pentatonic scale. And then I'll slid into the 3rd interval of the scale. And then watch this. So that's coming down to the 5th fret. We go 4th string down to the 5th string. Now these notes, look at the notes there. Those are the notes right out of my G major chord. It's just strings 3, 4, and 5. So I'm just kind of picturing the notes of the chord. It's really like an arpeggio. So a lot of these things are going on, and it happens kind of quickly. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but it really pulls on the same principles of taking the notes of your major scale or your major pentatonic scale, if that one's easier, and just kind of working those into the melody. It starts with you getting the melody right, though. I had to work out the boring, simple melody first. And then once I had that and I was able to do that, then I could go and start working in some other things. But those other things, those are just the major scale, or they're chromatic notes, or they're the notes of your chord. That's it. That's all it is. So it's just getting clever with your major scale. And one of the big things which we're about to look at is, the second time through, I'm going to do this. In fact, let's listen to it. All right, so as you can see, we're just repeating that same melody, but now it's starting to have its own little spin. So it's got all these extra notes. Where are those coming from? They're coming from the G major scale. So this little part is really just taking that same chromatic idea, but just sort of rearranging the notes. You can have fun with it. It's just 3 notes, but it's taking the timing and doing what you want with it. I could have went. That would have worked too. There's a lot of different ways I could do it. It's the same 3 notes, right? But it's just kind of like, if you were padding out an idea, how would you do that? Would you always do it the same way, or would you kind of, throw in a little bit of like a little fill? It's kind of like a little fill lick. It's almost like being a drummer in a way. You're thinking that way. So that's the first part. Now the second part is really the most interesting part of the lead. And what I'm doing is I'm doing a scale pattern. I'm going to put a lesson up on the screen where I talk about how you take the major scale and you create scale patterns. Actually, in that lesson, I think I used the pentatonic scales for it, but the same principle applies to your major scale. You go down a set of notes. In this case, I'm going down 4. You could pick however many you want. That's what's cool. You get different patterns depending on the number you choose. And it's a feel thing. You know, it depends on the tempo and what you're comfortable with. But what I'm doing is I'm taking the notes of my G major scale, right? And I'm starting here on this 5th fret 1st string, and I'm walking down 4 notes. There's the 4 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I go back to the top, but start at the next one down. So instead of me starting here, I start here, the next note down in my major scale. And that's how it works. I go down 4 notes, then I go back to the top of the scale, and I come back down 4 more notes, and I just keep doing that, and you'll hear it. Listen to it. If I keep going. It's a great way to learn your scales. It's the best way to learn your scales. It's a lot better than going. Because what you're doing is you're actually creating melody. You can use this. You can go back up. So you can go down or up. And I was doing it very sloppy there, but just to give you the idea of the principle. So that's where that little idea came from. So it came right down into the major pentatonic scale pattern 2 that we talked about. But it's very simple when you see it that way. And then I kept going with the melody. Now this time I went astray. I went and came up here instead of. So what I did was nothing like the melody, but it started with the melody. And then, you know, I went right back into kind of a bluesy thing. But so all I'm doing when I'm playing this, these are still the notes of my G major scale. But I came up to this point. So here's what I was picturing, and hopefully this will be a little light bulb for you. When I was playing and I came up to here, I was seeing this. My G chord here, using the E shape. Actually, I was seeing the triads. So the top part of that E triad, this is the top part of my C shape, my G chord using the C shape. It looks like the little D triad from first position. So that's a G chord here, and then I've got one up here, the top part of my A shape. So when I see these little triads, I've got the major scale connected to them. So it helped me to go. When I played that, I was just picturing the scale up here off of that triad. Hopefully that makes sense. And then to conclude that lick, I went back to my E shape and played. And that's exactly what we talked about last week, the sweet spot, blending the major and minor pentatonic scale. You start with the minor, slide into the major on that first string. And then after I hit that G note, that 3rd fret 1st string, that note, I slid to that same note on my 2nd string, which is up here on the 8th fret. And that puts me in another hand position to play over the part 2 video. And we can do a whole other. All this other stuff happens in this spot. And so I'm going to save that for part 2. But that's how and I love that. You hear that in the blues a lot, where you'll hit the one note here out of your E shape, and then you'll slide into it up on the 2nd string. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this. Leave a comment below and let me know if any of these things have just been light bulbs for you and you go, oh, I get how it works, or if you've got any points of confusion and you want more clarity. I always appreciate that. I do read through all the comments, and it helps me week after week to really know what's connecting and what isn't. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button and then the alert bell so you can be notified when I put up new lessons, which I do all the time, every Friday. I've been doing it for, I think, 14 years now. I've kind of lost count, but I never miss a Friday. So if you're into this and learning how to improvise on guitar, definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel here. All right, we'll see you in the part 2 video.